Beware of the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides.
Whew. Hey kiddies, it's Terrible Triple Feature time once again. We are still in the thick of it in October and the horror movies. I'm up to about 42 horror movies watched and sat through. And I gotta tell you, it's getting a little rough. There are definitely distinct moments this month where I wanted to just watch something that didn't involve horrific murder or torture of otherwise nice people. But I have soldiered through with, the small exception of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because it just came back. But I'm still managing to go to work for 40 hours every week, and I'm still keeping up with my exercise. I just finished doing a big run, and you know what? After any big run or anything physically exerting, I like to replenish my energy levels with a nice cup of the stuff. Have you tried the stuff? It is just delicious and addicting and just yummy. Which reminds me of today's triple feature thing. Continuing with the horror movies, we're going to be looking at remakes of The Blob, that old horror movie in the 50s / gigantic joke, starring Steve McQueen as a teenager in his 20s, fighting a giant amorphous globular object that consumes everything in its sight. We're going to look at 3 movies that have been made in recent years that remind me of The Blob and or have similar themes. Our menu includes Dean Koontz's The Phantoms, The Stuff, and the remake of The Blob. I'm not going to lie, when Phantoms was out in the theater, I did not watch it because it didn't look particularly good. But then a few years later, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and Halden McNeil, played by Ben Affleck, recommended the film highly, saying that Ben Affleck was the bomb in Phantoms, to which Jay seconded, saying Phantoms like a motherfucker. So I saw it, and wouldn't you know it, Ben Affleck is the bomb in Phantoms. This is a pretty good movie. It sort of begins where a Blob movie should end, with like the entire town wiped out, and nobody knows what's going on. Where did everybody go, and why so suddenly? And thrust in this situation are a doctor played by fairly innocuous and boring Joanna Going, her sister played by the always delightful Rose McGowan, and a sheriff and a few sheriff's deputies played by Ben Affleck as our FBI agent, or our disgraced FBI agent turned local sheriff, a delightfully odd and creepy Liev Schreiber, I think it's Schreiber, and Nicky Katt. If you don't know, Nicky Katt is an up-and-coming that guy. You've seen him in a number of things, including The Limey, Insomnia, School of Rock, The Dark Knight, Planet Terror, and Grindhouse, Sin City, and Waking Life. And he's always delightful. He does not get a lot of lines in this movie, which is not necessarily a spoiler. He's a very terse individual. The army is brought in to figure everything out, and they bring in the resident expert / tabloid reporter Timothy Flyte, Flyte, played by the incredible Peter O'Toole. Now here's the thing. There are 2 types of Peter O'Toole. There's Peter O'Toole when he takes a movie seriously, and there's Peter O'Toole when he's phoning it in. Now what makes Peter O'Toole one of the greatest actors ever is that functionally, there is no difference between the 2. He does not seem to care about this movie, but that is not to say he is not having fun, which I think he was, because it's a pretty good performance by him. Everybody works together to fight the giant amorphous man-eater thing, but it has a lot of similar themes with the aforementioned amorphous goopiness. Small towns, army brought in, and then being completely helpless before the blob. But it's a really great time. Next, we have the stuff. And I'm going to indulge a little bit more. Enough is never enough of the stuff. Now, what I'm reading here is that the stuff was made by Larry Cohen, and it is his horror movie slash commentary on the crass commercialism and capitalist nature of Americans. I don't really see it as a horror movie because the stuff is delicious. It says that the stuff is a living organism that eats its consumer slowly from the inside out. Alright, so I'm not going to be eating this stuff anymore. No, this stuff, Larry Cohen's a really good time. He was the creative genius behind Q, The Winged Serpent, It's Alive, and a whole slew of other movies, And God Told Me to Kill. The beginning of the film is one of the greatest things I've ever seen because it takes place at a coal mine. Not the whole movie, but the beginning. And this guy is out on his cigarette break, wanders off, lights up, and notices a white viscous ooze erupting from the Mother Earth. And what does he do? What is the first thing he does? He sticks his finger in it, smells it, and shoves it in his mouth. It came out of the ground! It's still one of the funniest goddamn things I've ever seen. And the guy notices it tastes delicious. And so we could sell this. And as it turns out, the amorphous blob thing that we're calling the stuff because we have no other real name for it, is eating people alive. That's its whole goal, is to eat everything. As is the metaphor for America and eating everything we can get our hands on. Even stuff that comes out of the ground. It's funny. It's got a great cast. The main character is played by the always wonderful Michael Moriarty, and as per every contract he ever had with Larry Cohen, he is forced to provide a different ridiculous accent. This one is Southern. When he was in Q, The Winged Serpent, it was Asshole New York. When he does Pick Me Up, The Masters of Horror, he's doing some bizarre upstate New York trucker slash, Tom Waits. It's bizarre. It also features a very young Brian Bloom. The movie focuses more on his older brother, which you can recognize. They were actually brothers in the film and brothers here. Brian Bloom, you can see more recently in stuff like Smokin' Aces, and then to a much larger part in the A-Team as the Pike, I think, was his mercenary name. And he was really a lot of fun. He stole the movie, I thought. It was impressive. Eyebrows. But it also has Garrett Morris as a thinly disguised famous Amos. He's Chocolate Chip Charlie, completely different concept. And the always delightful Paul Sorvino as a military nut. It's Larry Cohen, so it's a very clever script. Technology wasn't great then. I think it was the early 80s or late 70s. And it looks pretty cheesy. Oh, it had to be. It was in the middle of the 80s because they use one of the sets from A Nightmare on Elm Street, the one that they used, the Tina's room set. Or no, Glenn's room. The room where Johnny Depp gets sucked into his bed. They used for one of the stuff live action sequences. So it had to be in the middle of the 80s. So there's really no excuse for how cheesy it looks. But you should watch it anyway. But don't eat it. I'm going to, at the end of this video, I'm going to go get a stomach pump. Finally, we have the Blob remake. And it's an interesting thing in that when movies get remade now, 9 times out of 10, they're not great. Usually because the director, the people involved, aren't really bringing anything new, or they're, or they're just, following some set formula of that they think Hollywood thinks works. Sometimes they do bring interesting things to it, like Rob Zombie's Halloween. I thought was great. The Todd Farmer My Bloody Valentine was good. The Willard remake was great. But back in the 80s, remakes were friggin' awesome. Yeah, John Carpenter's The Thing was just took it to new levels. You had David Cronenberg's The Fly, which I will just watch that movie at the drop of any hat. And you got Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont writing's the Blob remake. And, this is the second time in as many weeks that Frank Darabont has appeared on the triple feature, and this is always a great time. Chuck Russell is a great special effects / horror director. He had previously done Dreamscape, and I want to say Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 happened before The Blob. I know he directed it. And he would later go on to direct The Mask and Eraser, the movie in which Arnold Schwarzenegger played chicken with a 747 and his gun. Either way, The Blob, just great because it follows the original film fairly closely, but does everything you wish the original film could have by having, special effects and or a budget. The cast is really a lot of fun. You've got Kevin Dillon in just an epically horrible mullet. I mean, this is a friggin'... He looks like Cro-Magnon through most of the film, and he's wearing some sort of piratey shirt underneath his leather jacket. You got Shawnee Smith, who would later go into great Scream Queen fame as Amanda in the Saw series. You got Jeffrey DeMunn as the sheriff, who would later become a Frank Darabont regular. Paul McCrane as his deputy, holding on to whatever hair he had left at that point. And in the background, there are a lot of random little people, or little actors, including, if you're an anime fan, Bo Billingsley, the voice of Jet Black from Cowboy Bebop, is live and on screen, and you can put a face to the voice. A lot of great special effects, a lot of good horror movie gags, a lot of just, not making fun of horror movies, but kind of poking at certain genre tropes a little bit. Really great jokes in it that were paced well, and just a lot of really gruesome death. I mean, it's just a great remake. It's everything you want a remake to be. It is the premise that you liked turned into a movie that can match what the idea was, much like John Carpenter's The Thing or David Cronenberg's The Fly. So these are all sort of remakes and or visitations on similar themes in remakes of the Blob movies. Phantoms, The Stuff, which you should watch but not eat, and the actual Blob remake. We'll see you next week for our last installment of 2013, October, and hopefully I'll have something really good to finish out the month, because Halloween, October, it's here!